This is our fashion history report on the 1960s, and I am Chelsey.
I'm Laney.
And I'm Amber.
So to start off our presentation, we're going to start with designers. Our first designer we have is Mary Quinton. I hope I said that right. I looked it up about 5 times. She is one of the influential designers in the 1960s. One thing that's very interesting about Mary is that she was a self-taught seamstress, which I think is really impressive, especially for being someone who's influential in history. She also received her education originally in art education. And one highlight that she has is she is known for high hemlines, which was very influential, and they called it the Roaring 60s. So the high mini skirts and things like that. We can go to the next slide. Next is Valentino. He had his trademark color, which was red, and he made a very beautiful dress for Elizabeth Taylor, which I think is really, really cool. But one thing that made him very influential in the fashion industry is he launched a no color collection. So just beiges and whites, which was very contrasting for the time frame, because if we think of the 60s, we have all these bright colors, which later transitions into the 70s. So this made him really pop in the designing world. And this was in sorry, I lost my place. This was in 1962 when this collection came out. Next, we have Oscar de la Renta. He is from the Dominican Republic, and he's a Dominican Republic American fashion designer. And he liked to blend luxury American he liked to blend European luxury with like American ease. So he liked to blend, think of like very elegant dresses with very relaxed clothing. And he opened his first store in 1965. And he focused a lot on casual luxury. And he settled in Paris. And this is where he worked as an assistant for Lavon Costello, who was a head designer at the time, before he moved to New York and then started to make a name for himself as his own stylist or own designer and creator. Anna Clean she's a designer for the American women. So she wanted to take the feminine centric design and alter it to, at the time, women started being more involved in the workforce. And so she wanted to reflect this in her clothing. And one thing that she said, there's a quote that I have here that I thought was really inspiring, was clothes aren't going to change the world, the women who wear them are. And so this really highlights her whole ideology moving forward with creating her clothing. She replaced like posh dresses that women would wear at home with a casual blazer and trousers. She's also known for creating the first fully coordinated closet, which is clothes that just match and intermingle and have like the same color palette, and they can be worn and interchanged with each other. Then our last designer is Godfrey Benin. He was known for being the godfather of minimalism, and he took a non-stereotypical approach on designing women's clothing. And he studied in New York at I hope I don't butcher this, I'm sorry, the Trafalgar School of Fashion. And he originally was really good at altering suits, so that's where he started at. But he eventually switched into designing, and he designed a dress for Lyndon B. Johnson's daughter. And actually, I found this really interesting. It wasn't his best design, so that helped transition him into minimalism. And one thing that I found interesting that he's known for is he served for 40 years in the fashion industry before he tragically passed away from pneumonia due to complications of cancer. But the Council of the Fashion of Designers of America created an annual Godfrey Benini Lifetime Achievement Award to honor his legacy. And that's all I have for the designers.
All right, so now let's focus on what's happening in the 60s. So first up, in I think 1960, the early election of President John F. Kennedy. This sparked a lot of political movements and all that, because he was the youngest president of the US that we've ever had. Yeah, that was elected, because we had President Roosevelt. He was relatable. A lot of people liked him because he had a young family, and a lot of young families really related to him and Jackie, which we'll see Jackie Kennedy in a lot of fashion movements. And then this was a new beginnings type of leadership for the 60s. He was elected after the Cold War, and he was really he was against Nixon in the election, and that was a lot of controversy with a young President Nixon. We already had Nixon. This is John F. Kennedy. He's a new president, which a lot of people haven't heard of, and he's of the Democratic Party. All right. Next up, JFK. He announced the Civil Rights Bill in June of 1963, and it was a televised event that he revealed this. And then the act wasn't actually passed until 1 year later. It was passed through Congress July 2nd, 1964, and the outcome of the bill was that it outlawed racial segregation in public accommodations, which were hotels, schools, anything public. And then the same year, Martin Luther King Jr. was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, which is the same right as the Civil Acts, for his works in the movement. So, and it was a peaceful movement, which is why he got the Nobel Peace Prize. Another thing happening was the space race. So that was huge. America versus Russia. A lot of advancements. And it was a lot of who's going to space faster. Which a lot of Americans were watching this as Russia won the race, quote unquote, to orbit the Earth in 1957, sorry. And a lot of fear came over America as they thought that satellites were going to be used to spy on Americans. And with all the wars going on, it was very frightening. After many failed attempts with the US orbiting, we finally got to orbit the Earth in 1962 on the Friendship 7 by John Glenn. He was the first man to orbit, not the first man, sorry, first American to orbit the Earth. And then in July 1969, we had the Apollo 11 landing on the moon, which was the first person on the moon. We beat Russia there, and that made a lot of hope for Americans, being like, we've got this. And over here in this picture, you can see John F. Kennedy with John Glenn. This is the Friendship 7, and John F. Kennedy had a lot of impact on the space program with NASA, during this time of election. And then here's this. I included this quote from Neil Armstrong: "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," which was, yeah. All right. Here's NOW, which is the National Organization for Women, which was established in 1966. It was an activist group for equality upon sex discrimination upon like women and men. And this was happening pretty much in the same time as racial discrimination and a lot of protesting. It was established in Washington, D.C. Here's a picture of one of the groups protesting. We also had the student protests. They protested peace in Vietnam, no war, anti-war protests, civil rights protests. College students were fed up with like how the older generations were dealing with this, and they wanted peace. They didn't want any more war. They wanted to guarantee that there was going to be no more war. So they went out and they protested out of class. And yeah, let's see over here, peace in Vietnam, which this really started the hippie movement with no war, peace. Over here, the hippie movement. Okay, so they got a boom of colors, lots of colors. Like I said, with the student, the student protest rebellion was a big part of this, was doing the opposite of the older generation, which was what like modern America was about. And so they wanted to do the exact opposite. Rebellion with the clothes, was wearing t-shirts, jeans, not the traditional suits and ties to go to work, living in a house, having like going to work every day. They wanted to live by love and youthfulness. A lot of you see like this hippie bus right here. So they travel a lot with that. Rebellion, love. It was mostly youth, but like it was mostly like the college kids and early adult years. Rejection of war and fighting. They didn't want no more love. And then we also had Woodstock in 1969, which was a huge festival, celebration of peace, love, and music. It was outdoor festival that ranged 3 days. And it was a music festival. And they're called hippies because of the hip beats, the hip new beats of music around that time, especially in England, but it came over to the US. So that's all I had for history of the 1960s. We'll go on to characteristics of clothing.
All right, so yeah, now we're going to look at some of the specific characteristics of 1960s fashion. We can go to the next slide. The 1960s was an era when fashion became more casual, and it was also very vibrant and bright in color, as you'll see as we go through the next few slides. So the A-line dress was a staple for women, and it became more common to be shorter in length during the 60s. And Mary Quant, that we talked about earlier, one of the designers, and she was one of the designers that made it super popular, the miniskirt. And the empire waist was really popular, and also the wrap dress. Both of those were coming into style along with the pantsuit. And then for men and women, blue jeans were a must-have for everyday style. And then hip huggers, which were pants that tightly hugged the hips and the thighs, and then were looser more towards the bottom or flared out. And in the 60s, leg warmers were different than the chunky leg warmers that you think of from the 80s, They were usually thick stockings or knee-high socks that change up the look of an outfit. And then stretch pants and leotards were also popular during this time. Okay, so then when it comes to skiing, jumpsuits were the way to go. Emilio Pichu designed this particular jumpsuit, which is also in a fun pattern, which matches the tone of the 60s. Another style choice for both men and women was the Nero jacket, which consisted of hip-length tailored coat with a mandarin collar and then buttons down the front. And bell-bottom pants and palazzo pants, those were also all the rage at the time. The difference between the two is that the bell bottoms, they're tight on the hip and then on the legs, and then they flare out at the bottom and then like on the calf part. And then the palazzo pants, they're wide all the way throughout the pant leg. And then what is the Jackie look? So the Jackie look was coined after Jackie Kennedy, the first lady of the United States. So this look meant a nice tailored skirt with white gloves and a pillbox hat, like you can see in this picture. And I personally love the pink in this classy look. And then sleeveless dresses, large buttons, and the iconic go-go boots were also a part of the 1960s fashion. And then this leads perfectly into an example I found on my own of my own relatives wearing 60s fashion trends. So in this picture, you can see the sleeveless A-line dress look, as well as the large buttons and empire waist. And I found this on Family Search, so do your family history. And then the two main style tribes of the 60s era were mods and hippies. So the hippies were characterized by peace, love, and freedom as the message that they wanted to send to the world. And they do this through their style. So everyday outfits had vibrant peace signs, frayed tie-dye shirts, puff sleeves, and like medallion necklaces. And then the mod style was characterized by bright colors and fabric patterns taken from children's wear mixed with bold like geometric prints, puffed cap sleeves, and then a knee-high boots to create a modern new look. And then that's a wrap on our presentation for 1960s fashion. So thank you for watching.